Hello, I'm Dr. Nina Riastoria, and I'd like to welcome Mary and Chandler Ryan. They are the daughters of Tom Ryan, and he is the founder of Nobody's Normal. And he's a father that had anxiety, depression, and bipolar growing up as a teen. And their children are here to share their story about what it's like to grow up with somebody that's mentally ill with their own struggles and how they coped, with hopes that they can help all of you and many children out there today on how to cope with someone with the mental health issues. So, welcome, Chandler and Mary.
Happy to be here.
Gosh, this has been quite a journey for you both, huh? For sure. Just seeing your dad in the highs and the lows, and right now in a really good place, and really wanting to celebrate mental health and what it's about as he sees it as a gift. But let's step back. That's where he is today, and that's why you're here to talk about that. But growing up with Dad, how was that for you? Kind of give it some insight about what y'all went through as children.
As a kid, it was just kind of my normal. I didn't know. My dad was different. I didn't know. I thought all dads were like how my dad was. I thought all dads were as intense and emotional and passionate and loving. But I just thought I didn't know any different. And so I didn't know maybe some of the things that were going on behind closed doors weren't normal. And so that didn't kind of happen until later in life when you kind of are maturing and growing and figure out, oh, wait, like when I'm at a friend's house, their dad isn't like that. And their dad isn't yelling or raising their voice or as intense. And that's when you kind of start to notice, I think, as you grow up and experience other people's lives are around you. And you're like, oh, wait, mine doesn't look like that. What's different about my life?
Yeah, it made you step back and look back and go, wait a second, this isn't what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
How about for you, Chandler? What was your experience like?
Very similar. It wasn't until you start going over to other people's houses and you have something to compare it to, or you have them come over to your house and see them react to the environment, and then all of a sudden you realize it's not normal, and you have this feeling of wanting to protect them, but also the love that you have for your father. But until I think high school for me, I didn't really know specifically what was going on, so I didn't really know how to explain it. It's just you don't, when he's napping, you don't, we have to be quiet. Like sleepovers were very rare. It was more of a comparison, but I feel like I am so grateful because of it, because he's not only able to help me understand myself, but I can empathize and sympathize with so many people because of it, and help them when they feel like they're questioning their own mental health. I can ask them what's going on and kind of help direct them because of it. So it is, it's a blessing and a curse.
When you said it helped you understand yourself better, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so you notice similarities between like one parent or another, but there are aspects of myself that I started learning, like, oh, it's not normal that I feel this way at this moment, or it's, I can't get out of bed at the moment, and this looks a lot like my dad. And so then when I would get angry at him because of that, then I, all of a sudden, as I grew up and these things were kind of matriculating, I was able to then have kind of a different aspect of it, whether it was anxiety or depression or getting just really angry all of a sudden. I was able to have a lot more understanding when at times, you're upset because you don't understand. It helped me be more forgiving to myself, I think. But also it was scary because you don't, is it going to be as strong as what he has? Am I going to develop this? Am I going to be able to control myself? Because I think that sometimes he didn't feel in control of his own emotions. And it's scary because you don't know if that's in your future as well.
Yeah. For you, it seems, and then I'm going to ask you this too, Mary. Yeah. For you, your experience, you became very introspective, especially as you got older. and notice different feelings. And am I like my dad? And how can I manage these emotions in a healthy way? Because I don't want to do what my dad did. And I want to have control over that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
100%.
Yeah.
And I notice similarities, and I know that bipolar does not come. It's something that manifests a little later on and in your 20s. So like when I would be upset, or I would be depressed, or I would be angry about something, there's a fear that it's starting. And I know it's something that gets stronger as you age.
Yeah.
And so there was this fear initially in my early 20s where I was like, am I going to see red and not be able to come out of it? I want to be able to manage this, whether it's going to therapy or finding the right medication. And that journey, I'm 28 years old, and I know my dad went through it for so long, and just for 3 years trying to figure out the right concoction and the fear of the unknown. It was scary, but I finally found the right balance for right now. And I'm 28 years old, but it took a long time, and it was scary because you don't
know. And what I love that you said is that you were fearless to try to figure it out. And as hard as it was, you try to figure it out, and you're trying to find the right balance in this moment.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
What about for you, Mary, when you think back? She was very introspective. You talked about, wow, I realized at a certain age, this was not normal, what I was experiencing. Yeah. Tell me the different emotions that developed from that and how you handled that.
For me, mine's very different than Chandler's. I'm younger, and so she didn't kind of figure it out until high school, but I figured it out when I was 10, and it was a very vivid moment. It was the gradual noticing things, for sure, of little things that my dad would do to where I'm like, oh, that's not normal. But I remember the drawer of like his medications and full of them, and I never knew it was wrong. And we always just said that Daddy had a few like wacky chemicals in his brain, and I was like, that's fair. I'm like, okay. And it was when I was 10, and any young girl, their dad is the light of their life. My dad hung the moon for me and was my whole entire world, is my whole entire world. And I was 10, and I walked downstairs. It was a normal night. And my dad was in his office with the lights turned off, with headphones on, sobbing. And I remember just looking, and I didn't know what was wrong, but I needed to figure out how to fix it. And I think it was in that moment where that became my goal and my job, was how do I help him? And so, but I didn't know what was wrong. And I'd never seen my dad cry like that. And so I stood there, and I walked in, and I put my arms around him, and I was just asking what I could do, what was wrong, what happened. And he couldn't even talk. He was crying so hard. And it was dark. He was in his office. He was sitting on a medicine ball. And so I just ran to get my mom. I didn't know what else to do. And she went in there, and she just wrapped her arms around him and just held him for probably over an hour. And I went outside, and I sat on the back porch. And that was when I kind of was like, what do I need to do to make my dad better and happy? And that was the role I kind of took on in that moment. And then that's the role I kind of kept for kind of the rest of my life until I got older. And so for me, that was the night they sat me down and told me that my dad had bipolar and depression. And so, because of course before that I wouldn't have known what that meant. And so they sat down and just kind of explained that Daddy had some really sad days.
And how old were you at this moment?
I was 10.
10 is a lot to take in at 10 years old.
Oh yeah. And so for me, there wasn't a lot of, I put myself on the back burner, and it wasn't about me anymore. It was about him and how I could help him. And that's just kind of my nature too. And like, that's just kind of who I am as a person. And so
you're a helper.
Yes, I'm a nurse. Like I take care of kids. Like it's just
that's just
kind of who I am. And so that's always been me. And so for me, I'm at the internal, like, figuring out the effects it's had on me right now. And I'm 23. And so, but from that moment, for the next 10 years, was all about him. And especially when things started getting worse, and you throw in the suicide aspect of worrying, what is he going to do? And it's when she went to college, that's kind of when my full-time, how can I make you happy enough to keep you alive and like love you enough? What can I do to make you not sad and to make you want to live and to stay here with me? And so that's the role I took on starting around that age, especially when my parents were starting to split. And so when I remember calling her, we've talked about it. It was my freshman year of high school, and it was in between soccer and lunch. And it was the most vivid feeling I've probably ever had in my life. And I knew I was going to walk home and he wasn't going to be there anymore. And I didn't know why, but I just called her and I was like, I'm going to go home and it's not going to be okay. And so trying to calm me down, couldn't. And we lived about a block away from the high school. And so I walked like there to school every day. And so I'm in between, I had like a 30-minute window in between.
And you're at like 15 period. Right now, right?
And I would walk home every day and I would look through the window to make sure he was still sitting there. And so for me, discovering like that personal aspect and really like self-evaluating wasn't a thing. Like I was not my concern. I was not my priority. Yeah. I of course had stuff going on. Like I'm a teenager and teenager things, but I didn't care. And like, that just wasn't what I was focused on. He was my focus. And so, I thought that was my job, was what can I do to make him stay? And like, what can I do to make him feel loved? And what can I do to make him feel happy? And how can I take care of him to make him stay? And to where he won't have an outburst, or to where he won't, what can I do? Yeah. And so, especially when it's something that you can't really control, but I could control what I could do and stuff. And so, and this was never something he asked me to do or anything like that, but that was, especially when she was gone, it was just me. And so for me, the realizing the personal aspect of like the effects, or just self-evaluation and doing the healthy, like self-analyzing was never a thing for me, because he was my everything and he was my goal and the most important thing to deal with. And so now this has been for me later in life of like, oh, okay, like I'd been putting out fires all around me and just like creating a lot of ones within me. And then now this is when I'm in that period of life of like really self-evaluating and learning everything.
Kind of a new chapter for you.
Oh yeah.
Because my assumption would be taking on that kind of responsibility at 10 to almost 20, or different emotions throughout your childhood, teenage years.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight. And
yeah, of course.
I was kind of taking care of everybody but myself. And so especially like at 10, you don't even know how to take care of yourself at that point. But I had to grow up really, really fast in that aspect. And so, but a lot of the anxiety was that every day, like, it's almost kind of like a crippling fear of like, you're sitting in class and a principal walks in and I'm like, oh, they're going to pull me out and tell me something that my dad's not here anymore. Yeah. Or when your phone rings, who's going to call, and like all of that. And so it's just kind of never knowing what you're going to walk home to. And it's that constant like eggshells. And so it's the constant anxiety, the constant fear, but it's also still, and then you have the moments of the bipolar outbursts when it's
scary. You're
staring and that's your dad standing in front of you. And that's my dad, who loves me more than literally anything in this world, who would never do anything to hurt me. But who I'm seeing in front of me isn't that person at that moment, and you don't know what they're going to do. And that's really scary.
It's scary.
Because my dad would never do anything to hurt me physically, emotionally, anything like that. But who's standing in front of me?
Who's this person with bipolar right now in this moment? And that's the scary part.
And that person might. And so that's never scary. Kind of knowing who you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then it's, you can't be mad. Like, don't want to be mad at that person. They can't help it. It's not their fault and all of those things. So it's that weird in between of like, he doesn't mean it. He's doing his best. He's doing this. But
showed a lot of grace.
This mental illness is one big blanket of grace, because, and that's how you have to see it. There is grace for it and there is forgiveness. And so, but it's within those moments that are pretty scary, because it's my dad in front of me. But at the same time, it's not. It's what's coming out is you're scared and you don't know what they're going to do. And especially if you've seen moments of them, or like semi, or just like a violent tendency or anything like that. It's always in the back of your mind, is this going to happen again? Or if someone's crying in the movie theater, I know that was a huge one for us. And like, what's he going to do? I think is what you're kind of constantly living in, if just this state of eggshell anxiety, because he could be great for long periods of times. But then that can also change in a matter of seconds. And so you just never know what you're getting yourself into. And so you're constantly just living in that state of fight or flight, almost, is what it felt like. And so it was, you don't know it at the time because you're still just trying to survive. And so I think that's what's been for me now looking back, was just like surviving, but it was making sure he was okay the whole time. And so there's a lot of grace, so much grace. And he is a phenomenal dad. And
well, and that's why you're here doing what you're doing, because you want to celebrate him where he's at. I love that.
If you could only like see the it's
like night and day, right?
Oh, you can't wrap your hands around it, because it's like, who the heck is this person? And it's beautiful, and it's been he is just kind of evolved right before our eyes, and it's just been the greatest gift. And so even within those moments, he's still your dad.
Somewhere you still saw your dad, like even earlier on. And Chandler, Mary's talking a lot about walking on eggshells and everything growing up. Did you feel similar to that as well?
That was just kind of the overall underlying tone of the house. Was there were so many moments where, and what's difficult about looking back on these things is Dad had his drawer of medicine, but that was just like his drawer of just like samples of like, he's trying this, but we didn't know necessarily when he'd be on a new medication and how it would affect him differently, and how strong the dosage was and how much it affected who he was. Like, he had flown out of his body and someone else had stepped in, and it was just so normal for us. And whether it be him, just taking a couple naps a day and was just always sleeping, and having to be quiet, or being in a movie theater, and if someone was loud, it would be, oh my God, is he gonna like make a scene about it? If someone's talking on their phone, or going on vacation, it's always, Dad needs a day to acclimate because change is difficult. It was always just walking on eggshells, but not understanding that we had been doing that our whole lives, I suppose. You just thought it was
normal,
just completely normal.
Yeah. For you, obviously, you're sitting here so close together. Y'all are very close, and I'm wondering, how was that always growing up? And how did you support each other through this? Did you have conversations about, Dad, something's not right with Dad, or what were your conversations about, and how did you support each other?
It wasn't until later that I think that we knew to have a conversation about it. Yeah. It was just, oh, this is what's happening right now. Like, let's, there's, for me, I know it was protecting Mary from seeing the fighting, because it wasn't something, my parents never fought growing up. But when it did kind of start happening, or there would be outbursts, it was, we're going to go into another room and we're going to sit and let's just distract each other. Like, let's just talk and like play make believe. And like, my escape, where she had the strength to dive in, mine was to be a recluse and to be anywhere and anyone else. I was always reading, like trying to get away, be another place. And so that's kind of what I tried to do for Mary. It's, let's go be somewhere else right now. Let's go play. Let's go tell each other stories in the bathtub and turn off the lights and like make it a game. And I know that so many people go through things that are so much more intense, but for our situation, it was just trying to protect someone who was so sensitive from, I knew how scared she felt for like what's going on. She was always we're both sensitive, but she would take it on personally and want to help. And so I just knew that we had to get through, whether it was 15 minutes or the hour that there was an outburst. We just had to get through to the other side, and then he would be okay. So I just never wanted her to fear him.
Yeah. So you took on the big sister role and took her to a place.
Yeah.
And distracted her.
relocate. Yeah. Yeah, but we still to this day are very, very, very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chandler, you shared a little bit about growing up with Dad and how you kind of helped your sister and supported her. Did you notice that she was doing that, and did you support her in some way when there was those kind of uncomfortable things happening at home?
Yeah, I think she said the bathtub thing. I remember the very first time we got in the bathtub. I was 6, and I remember the wallpaper. I remember sitting in there, and I kind of put together what she was doing, because you can hear everything that's happening behind the door, but what was on the other side of the door with me and her was really safe. And so that's who she was for me. She was always a really safe place. And when she's there, I knew it was going to be okay. And I knew she had me and knew she was protecting me. And I picked up on that very early. And she did a phenomenal job of like taking me away and I'm asking her hard questions that she doesn't know the answers to of, Chandler, what's happening and why? And like, are we going to be okay? And heavy stuff. And she doesn't know that. And for her, she's taking care of me at that point. And so she took on that role probably pretty early. But she goes to college. And so we're 5 years apart. And so that's my best friend. And that's my safe place. And my safe place is gone.
Yeah.
And she's doing everything she should be doing, going to college and living her life. But I'm in the 4 walls that are really not safe. And so at that was a really hard time, I think, in our like relationship, because I feel like she felt the weight of like guilt of leaving me to deal with everything. And we've had many conversations about this now.
And I didn't have a car. I was 2 hours away, but there's no way to get
She
down.
couldn't get to me.
Yeah.
And so you have me who's calling her, begging her to come back and telling her what's going on. And I can't imagine what it was like getting the call when I'm sitting on the floor of a bathroom telling her that I'm going to walk home and it's not going to be good. And that Dad's not going to make it. And I can't imagine how helpless she felt, because I'm coming to her because I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I need her to tell me it's going to be okay. And I needed her to come get me, and she can't. And so my safe place was kind of gone. And so that leads another form of like, just, there was no one to kind of share the balance of taking the heat of who he was at that time. So I was the receiving end of everything. And so that was, I think, harder. Yeah. I think that was the harder point in our relationship. But now,
your relationship with Chandler or your dad?
I think with Chandler too, because of course I think I felt a little bit of bitterness. I felt abandoned.
Yeah.
I thought she left me. And so which wasn't the case at all. And so, but we've always been, my sister's is and always has been my best friend. I used to leave her notes in her purse asking to hang out after school. And we always talk about, I would do anything just to hang out with her. Like 5 minutes with her would set me up for the rest of the year, because she was my everything. Yeah. And she still is. And so we talk every day. Like, and so now we get to have the conversations, especially like looking back and at different points of healing, and like able to handle a lot better now. That just comes with maturity. But I don't know what I would have done without her. And so she was like the anchor in a really, really, really big storm of what the 20 years before this were. And so, and she still is. And so I think that's also what's made us like so close to in like that aspect. But I mean, yeah, we talk every day, and she's my best friend in the world and always has been. And so it's been a really, really sweet gift of this whole thing, I think.
Brought you really close together.
Oh, yeah.
Really bonded you.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned when she left to college and you felt helpless or abandoned or all those different things.
Yeah.
It was a pivotal point in your life.
Yeah.
And people listening, they might have a sibling or they might not.
Yeah.
And so you lived with your dad kind of on your own. And so you had a choice to make.
Yeah.
How do I handle all this stuff? Chandler was good at distracting you and creating a safe place for you. How did you create that for yourself as you navigated this growing the rest of the years with him?
I wish I had a better answer, but the answer is the safe place was when I was with him, because I knew nothing was going to happen if I was there. It was the moments I wasn't there where you feel the guilt and the anxiety of, my dad's probably so sad, because not only was my dad my best friend, I'm my dad's everything. And you can, like with parents, you know, like the similarities. Me and my dad have always, like, something's just been different, and it's just been me and him. I was the one into sports. We're just very similar. Everyone always just called me like this little clone of him. And so that's just always been it. And so I knew he was okay when I was there because I made him okay.
Yeah.
And he would tell me that. And so I think that's also the hard part, is I knew. And so, but I didn't get my license for years, because if I got my license, that meant that my dad didn't have to pick me up from school anymore, and I didn't want to take that away from him, because I knew those moments meant a lot to him. And going back and forth between houses and all of that, like, the safe place was when I was with him, because I knew he was safe. And so I didn't create a safe place for myself because I didn't care about myself. I only cared about him and making sure he was okay. And because all of my problems as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old are very small in comparison to his. And so I thought that made them unimportant and not super. I didn't want anyone to have to carry the weight of what I was walking through, when I thought everything that he was going through was way worse, and like mine were very minuscule. And so, but I think also the safe places were at school and at extracurricular activities and playing soccer. And my dad was always so into like sports with me, and so I knew he loved getting to be that person for me. But unfortunately, like, even in those moments, in the back of your head, the thoughts are still running, and I'm still sitting in school and I'm still sitting in class wondering, like, am I going to get the call? And okay, I'm gone for 12 hours. It's the constant, just like, okay, I'm gone for 12 hours. Is he going to be okay? Is he going to make it 12 hours without me? And is someone to walk through the door and tell me he didn't make it the 12 hours? And so, but I knew I would walk across the street and wait for him to pick me up. And then I could breathe again, because he was there. And he was still there.
Yeah.
And so
it's emotional what you went through. And you said something about my issues at 15 were nothing. And I work with so many people that age, and it's a heavy. But I'm just saying, in comparison, you were comparing.
Oh, yeah.
I just need to be there for my dad.
Yeah.
And so there's people listening going, what do I do? I'm seeing what you're seeing, and maybe I have a safe place, maybe I don't.
Yeah.
What would you tell kids today on how to handle a parent that's going through mental illness?
It's hard. I think, like, because mental illness is so different for so many people, and it looks very different for so many people. But
some have access to help and others don't too.
And if you have a sibling, and if there's another spouse, and what does your support system look like? But I think that's it, is the support system. And I remember, like, finding out for the first time, I was 19 when I heard another person talk about their dad with mental illness. And I was like, wait, I'm not the only one. Like, oh, you walked through some really similar stuff. And so I think removing that isolating thing that it feels like, because it's also, I think something to this day that I still carry is just like, I don't want anyone to ever look at my dad and just see something that's not how I see him, as this wonderful man who, like, loves me. Because you hear all this stuff, and of course I'm like, I don't want anyone to think that of him. And so you don't want to talk about it or tell people about it. And so I think that was, for me, a lot of people didn't know, and people would point out stuff about it, but I would just dismiss it I would make an excuse about it, or someone would ask me why the way he was with me sometimes, or in certain situations of outbursts. But my advice would be to just don't be afraid to tell someone about it, and find someone safe that you can tell. Whether that is going counseling is great, because it's also, you need a safe place to talk about it. Because I didn't want to tell him all of that, because I don't want him to ever think that he was hurting me, because I knew that would kill him. I never wanted him to know that I was hurting. And so finding someone safe, finding anybody that you can just talk to and let bear your burden, because you're not. alone. And like, it's not, I think also my advice is from my experience of taking on the weight. Like, it wasn't my job, but I made it my job.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't
so
your job.
it wasn't my job to keep my dad alive. And so, but I made it my job. And so I think having someone to tell you that it's not your job and that you're allowed to be 10 and 11 and like do all these things. And so whatever age you are. And so to let yourself develop, and also bringing someone into it to help you fight and like help you have a voice and to help carry your mat when you don't feel okay and in the moments of outbursts and all of those things that still like can happen occasionally. And so I think letting someone bring it in that has a different set of eyes in the situation too, but also talking to someone that might deal with this all day to where you're like, hey, your feelings are very valid. It's okay that you feel like that.
Yeah.
And it's not weird or abnormal, and that's not selfish for you to feel that way. And because I think that's what it felt like, was selfish that I felt that way. And so I didn't tell anyone that. And so the worst thing you can do is to isolate and not talk about it and to carry the weight of the world.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot, and it'll eat you alive. And you were never meant to. And so that's what, and it's okay to sit in that and not carry that. And so
That's good, because people need to hear that. Chandler, how would you add to that, or what would you say different or the same on what Mary just said?
I mean, very similar to what she said. I think that I would add that it's still, regardless of what is presented to you, your parent or your loved one is still in there. And that is someone who cares about you endlessly. And this is something that they can't control, they might not understand, and they might not even admit to. But your parent loves you so much, and whatever you're doing, it's not your fault. It's like someone else steps in there, whether it's depression or anxiety, and you didn't cause this. You think that it's you, or you think it's because you were too loud, but it's, going through like depression or anxiety myself. It's your surrounding. It's just the way that the chemicals in their brain respond to, and they don't want it to happen. It's not because of anything that you did. And they're going to love you for the rest of their life, regardless if they can even see you in moments of heat or moments of red, is what I call them. But it's also okay to protect yourself. And if someone is not actively helping themselves, it is okay to step back. You can say, at the moment, you are not helping yourself, and I cannot be this platform for, I cannot be the person who makes you feel better, because I am also going through life and things of my own. And so knowing that it's okay to step back, and when you return, your parents always going to love you, and it's okay to take moments of pause and moments to let them have their own experience and healing, because you can't take that away from someone else. You can't heal another person. They have to heal themselves. And that's something that I think is so beautiful, is it might have taken a really long time, but my dad is finally realizing that he has to work on himself, and it was not an easy road to get there. It was so hard to watch. But I went through a period like Mary where my early 20s, up until about a year or two ago, I was very reclusive towards my dad and very resentful and angry. And our relationship has never been better than it is now, because we're able to healthily communicate. I can communicate when I need pause and let him know. And he understands. And so by him helping himself, he has helped every relationship surrounding him. And so
you're able to make healthy boundaries
Yes,
without the fear, without being scared to do it. And so it's not
easy. It's not easy to make boundaries. It's your parent. They would do everything for you. You want to do everything for them, but you can't reverse roles, and they're the parent, and you can't reverse the roles. It's not your time.
So you both said some great things, especially the boundaries. That's what I was hearing from both of you. You have learned how to set those boundaries, and that's scary. It's scary for a lot of people for different reasons.
Oh,
but
yeah.
you have to set them with your parent.
Yeah.
And say, it's not, you've got to figure it out. You know, this is, Dad, you got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And to have that voice again and to speak up and to be fearless, as you both have been, and just to not take on the responsibility of their illness.
Yeah.
There's something, and just, I love also, Chandler, that you said, your parents in there, they love you. They love you. You said that several times. They love you. And I think teens, children need to hear that. Do they love me? They do. They just have mental illness. And so you need to take care of you. Get help. Find support systems. Talk about it. Speak up. And you mentioned even counseling or like someone you trust, a close friend.
Yeah.
Because the more you share, the easier it feels, doesn't it? The more you started sharing your story about your dad,
100%.
probably felt what different feelings after starting to tell your story to people.
You can breathe.
Yeah.
It literally is like you're coming up for air. You're like, oh, okay, someone knows. Like, someone can help me. And that's what I think you kind of get good at, like, wearing a mask and all of that. But on the inside, you're just begging for someone to ask, like, hey, like, just to dig a little deeper and to break down a little bit of the wall that you've, like, kind of built up in the fight or flight of just, like, asking you, hey, like, are you okay? And, like, what's going on? And all of that. And so it's really easy to, like, I think build up a wall or just, like, want to make sure everything is, you need to make sure everybody's okay, so you're convincing everybody you're okay too.
Yeah.
And so to stop convincing, like, to let yourself, it is okay that it's affecting you and it's okay that it's hard. But like Chandler said, like, it's still them. Like, that's still my dad standing in front of me. And so, but I think that can also make it a little harder is because you feel guilty for communicating that they might be hurting you or like that their actions might be causing you. And so you feel
They don't want to do that.
No.
No parent ever wants to.
because it's not their intention. My dad
Right,
has never
it's not
once
their
looked at me and
intention.
said, Mary, the goal of this conversation is to hurt you. The goal of my actions right now is to cause you pain. That's what I want to do. That has never been a thought in his radar. And that's the hard part of the bipolar is in those moments, you don't know who the person is standing. That's not my dad standing in front of me, but it's the moments after where you see the guilt that they feel and he realizes what he did. And so he's standing there heartbroken and devastated. And so that's my dad. And so they're in there. And sometimes you kind of have to fight to remember. But like for what my like heart sometimes doesn't believe in the moment, there's a lot of grace that like covers that. And so I think there's grace on both ends to that person and to you have to show grace to yourself.
I was going to say, is that how you feel as well, Chandler? Just feeling that, how did you feel sharing, starting to share your story? And then did you experience some of the things she mentioned?
I found that because I am older than Mary, and so for a long time, this is something that was not talked about. People you didn't know what was going on inside of someone's house, especially in suburban Texas.
Yeah.
Until you went inside and you went to a couple sleepovers and you saw, okay, like there are other issues, but I know when I would talk about certain things with my friends or like boyfriends, even early in college, when Mary would call me and I would try to explain to him what was happening, they'd get very uncomfortable sometimes. And I would try and share with my boyfriend who, you know, you say that you love each other, and I'd be like, this is what's happening at the moment. And he would be like, I don't know what to say, and I don't really know how to take that on, and got very uncomfortable. And it caused a lot of strain between us because there wasn't, it just made him uncomfortable. And it was, I don't know if it was too much baggage, but with friends as well, they just wouldn't really know how to look at it, or they would just kind of skip over it. And sometimes you're thankful for that because you're like, I just want to come over and play, you know, like I don't want to tell you like why I'm upset or like, you know, why you can't come over to my house. Or explaining it. I found there was a lot of difficulties with it, but when you find those friends who experience, you know, who have their own, you know, skeletons, you know, everybody has their own bones in the closet. Finding someone who you can just talk to, it is like nothing else. And you are so thankful that you've crossed paths. And it happens, and it's not always easy to share, and sometimes you don't get the response that you think you're going to get, and that's okay. It might scare people, it might freak them out, but it's you're going to find your places, and it's okay, and it's trial and error, and you might not always react the way you're supposed to, but nobody knows how to react to something different. So it's fair, and have grace with yourself.
Yeah.
I will say it's like one of, like you said, for me, I think it was like, I felt selfish for bringing people in. I felt that it was, I didn't ask for this, and neither did they. So I felt selfish for telling them, and like selfish for bringing people into my life because it was so much, and it felt,
I feel like you're going to scare people.
explosive, and you're going to scare people, and you're too much to love. Like your life is too much. And especially if you might have heard that, or if someone said that to you, then you start to believe that lie. But one of the most beautiful things I've gotten to experience this is for the people who don't think that, for the people who see that and are like, oh, I love you. Like, I'm willing, I don't care. And so it is not selfish of you to bring people into your life. And it is almost more selfish of you to not let them, is what I've come to learn. Like, you're selfish from depriving them the opportunity to love that area of your life that's really worth loving too. Because it is brought a lot of gifts. And so I think one of the most tangible ways I felt loved have been when the people in my life know all of this and choose to still love all of this and carry that weight. And so it almost takes you back, and you're like, oh, wait, like, you want to carry this with me. And so the selfish thing, one of my friends told me that. They're like, it's almost selfish of you not to let me do this for you. Like, that's prideful of you, like, in that aspect. And so, but you can believe the lie that you're too much to love, and this area of your life is too much for someone else to love you because you didn't ask for that. I felt selfish telling people and letting people help me because they didn't ask for this either.
Yeah. Seems like you both are really good at practicing self-compassion today for yourself, showing grace. Showing grace to yourself and to others. And also just be more authentic and real. And from this experience, I bet you don't hold back anymore. I bet you you're fearless in conversations. If you feel something, you say it most of the time, even though it's uncomfortable. You are like fearless because of what you went through. And in some ways, it may have been a gift for you because it transformed you to who you are today.
100%.
And doing this and trying to help others now get it and understand it. So I want to end on this. We talked a lot about what your dad went through, and you're talking a lot today about how great he is.
Yeah.
Tell everybody what makes your dad so great today.
My dad my dad does not have the ability to be anyone other than himself. He is blessed with the gift of absolute authenticity, and he will not change his emotions or his feelings or the way he feels about something for anything. And that kind of truth gets you, it makes everything so much easier, even though it's hard initially. He's taught me just to communicate and to be whoever I am. And it's the compassion that I have for other people because of how my dad shaped me both negatively and positively is now benefiting other people, and now he wants to help other people. It is his superpower, and to be able to look at what this illness has done negatively in his life, and you know, he's however old he is, and he's not stopping. He has this feeling inside of him, and he's not gonna put it away for anything. And it might be like, you know, Van Gogh, where his paintings don't get seen for years and he goes through this madness, but what he sees in his eyes is so beautiful. And I think that that is a gift, is knowing that light does not come without darkness, and beauty does not come, you know, a flower is in the dirt for so long and is in the dark and doesn't see any light, but eventually with the right concoction, with the right amount of water and light, you can rise to the surface and eventually you'll do what you're supposed to do if you just keep trying. My dad is infallible in everything he does and never stops trying, and he could have stopped, and so many people stop, and that is fair, but he's never stopped. And so I will never stop.
What about you, Mary?
I love getting to talk about all the great things about my dad because the list is endless, like, truly. And not a lot of people get to see that because he is, like, guarded in some of those areas to where he doesn't let a lot of people see that. But I think some of the favorite things and the most wonderful things about my dad is how he can make you feel seen in a crowded room of people. He makes you feel seen and known, and he listens unlike anything I've ever seen. And he looks at people and says, I want to know you and I want to care for you, and I'm going to listen and I'm going to help you. And he is so caring in that way. And he has this special ability, and I'm not just saying this because he's my dad, but like, he makes you feel like everything's going to be okay if something's going on. And he has so many quotes. I have them all on my phone, but he always says to just take one bite of the elephant at a time. And when the world seems so big and like it is caving in, he is a steady constant. He never runs and he never leaves, and he will never leave me. He has always been so great about telling me that I could literally paint curves and he would be my biggest fan. And I think I always say that my dad loves me too much. Like, I've never seen the way that somebody loves me like the way no one loves me in this world more than my dad does, truly. And he loves in different ways sometimes, and the way he loves is how much he cares about teaching me and my sister. And you walk into his house and it is covered in sticky notes and papers. And if you've been in my dad's house,
No, I haven't, but I'm visualizing.
The walls are covered.
Oh, covered. Yeah. He loves to learn.
Yeah.
He can't stop learning. From the second he wakes up, he is researching. He is reading something to make himself better. He's studying.
Love it.
And he wants to give that as a gift to me and my sister. And so
he's trying to figure out life and help it not be so hard for us.
He's trying to take care of us for the rest of our life. Yeah. And he does that in the way teaching us stocks and teaching us things that kids don't want to hear about.
It's not,
he wants me and my sister to be okay for the rest of our life. And he spends all day trying to do that. And so he is steady. He is a comforter. He is kind and he is gentle. He's intense and passionate, but he doesn't let me run. And no matter how hard, I told him this the other day, no matter how hard I'm trying to like stiff arm him or stiff arm his love, he has a hold on my heart. He won't let me go. There's nothing I could do that would make my dad run or stop loving me in any way, shape, or form. And it's a really safe place to be, because I can call my dad and tell him I quit my job or did something else, and he would get in the car with me and he'd drive wherever I was going. And his love in a really unsteady world is something that is really steady for me.
Beautiful. And I think just love in general, that in itself today can go a long way. But your dad has so much more than just love to offer you, everything you just said. So I know that he's going to really love hearing what you had to say about him, all the great things at the end. And I thank you for...
Show him this first.
Yeah, start with this if you would.
And I'm sure everyone, the things you shared today will resonate with many people listening. So thank you for showing up and sharing your story.
I hope so. Thank you for doing
Thank
this.
you.